Shooting a film in the villages of Mirzapur would have been impossible a few years ago. The villagers would never have allowed any outsider to come in here with a camera. For then, there were children weaving carpets on these looms. Children as young as 8, or maybe even 7. Children who by law were not supposed to be working. Today, in these villages, child labor has almost disappeared. Many children like Kamla now go to school. 3 years ago, he was working long hours on the looms, weaving carpets. The workplace was dark, dingy, and badly ventilated. The work was back-breaking, and his employer oppressive.
जब मैं गलीचा बिनता था तो हाथ में छुरा लग जाता था, उसके बाद करिहाव पिराता था, उसके बाद करिहाव पिराने लगता था, आँख दर्द करता था, उसके बाद जब गलती हो जाता था गलीचा वाला मारता था, उसके बाद जब खाना खाने आते थे तो अबेर हो जाता था, उसके बाद जाने पर भी मारता था। क्या कर रहे थे? अगर एक आदमी तबीयत भी खराब हो गया तो वो भी मारने लगता था कि क्यों कि रुक गए, हमारा पैसा दे दो, झिन पढ़ो।
Kamla stays close to the village Murkhura. His father works as an agricultural laborer on daily wages and has to struggle to make ends meet. The situation worsens after the planting season and there is no work in the fields. The family often has to skip meals. 6 years ago, they were in dire straits and were forced to take a loan. The loan was given, but at a cost. Kamla would have to work on the looms. Today, Kamla's mother, Bhagotia, recalls.
उनकरे कमाई से कहिए ओढ़ना नहीं बात, कतौ खर्चा नहीं बा, हाँ? कतौ दुख या कतौ दाता कतौ ये बीमारी या तो कहाँ से कम लगाई? 4 बच्चे रहे, और हम झुआ फरसा कई खवावत रहे, तो नहीं जब पेड़ से उबरत रहे तब न भेजत रहे.
Loom owners everywhere in this area had the same strategy. They gave a loan to those in need and in return got their children to work on the looms. This practice of recruiting children for carpet weaving had been going on for decades in Mirzapur and the surrounding areas. Estimates are that around 150,000 children are working in the carpet industry. Located in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh in India, Mirzapur has been a major center for the production of carpets, many of which are sold worldwide. This industry is controlled by wealthy exporters who have a good feel for global markets. They supply designs and raw materials to middlemen who then commission loom owners to execute the orders. These loom owners carry the designs and raw materials to their looms in villages and small towns. For years, they've been employing children for weaving these carpets. Basantu, for instance, began weaving carpets when he was only 7. Like other poor parents, Basantu's mother, Kalui, was forced to send her son to work on the looms.
खेती बा ना हमारे बारी बा हमचे गरीब मनाई ठहरी अब गलैचा न भी नहीं तो हम पचा मार मार कुदेर करी तो का कर गलैचा के माथे बा है.
Poverty may appear to be the only reason why children like Basantu were on the looms and not in schools as they should have been. However, there were other reasons which were far more important.
जब छोटी जात का बच्चा जा रहा है तो उन्हें कायदे से न पढ़ाई सकत हैं. जहाँ कोई छोट मोट जात आई गवा है वो तो कुछ ध्यान दे रहा है और जहाँ बड़े आदमी हैं उनकी ड्यूटी बा तो वो छोट जाति के ध्यान पढ़ाई के नहीं वही घास छोलवावे वहाँ कोई रार करवावे पानी भरवावे चाहे बर्तन मजवावे यही अपन काम कराए रहा.
Jagvanti stays in the village Murkhura. Her views are shared by many disadvantaged parents who feel that teachers in schools are against them and that these teachers do all they can to discourage poor children from joining schools. Despite such pressures, some families do succeed in educating their children. Chote Lal, for instance, was able to complete his school and is one of the few educated men in his village, Kolhua.
जब हम स्कूल जाई तो उस समय अपने तबका में हम अकेले पढ़े लिखे जाए, क्यों हमरे के यहाँ संघे न रहें। जब स्कूल में जाए तो मास्टर साहब वहाँ पढ़ावें न गोड़ दबावें। वहाँ से जब छुट्टी होए रास्ते में आई तो रास्ते में उच्च वर्ग का लड़का हमसे छेड़खानी करें और कहें कि सर पढ़ के कलेक्टर हो गए, स्कूल पढ़ी आवत है।
These remarks evidently stung, and they continue stinging today. A few years back, Chote Lal and some like-minded friends started going from village to village, urging poor parents to educate their children and not submit to social pressures. This awareness-building program was organized by CREDA. CREDA, or the Center for Rural Education and Development Action, has been active in this area since 1982. In its initial phase, CREDA focused on issues like health and adult literacy. It provided relief to villagers when there were cholera epidemics and during floods and droughts. The organization faced little opposition and was soon able to win the goodwill of the community. However, when it started working for the well-being of poor children, the going became rough. One of CREDA's pre-primary education centers was burnt down in this village, Sikra. Gradually, CREDA began its program for the elimination of child labor in the carpet industry. The strategy was to set up special schools for these children.
The special school program we started under National Child Labour Project of Government of India could benefit thousands of the child labour withdrawn from the carpet industry, and it also acted as an entry point in the community to initiate a dialogue against the child labour and also building of an environment on the issue of the child right and the child labour system.
However, initially parents were suspicious and did not respond favourably. Was it because it would have meant a loss in family earnings? Evidently not. The real reason was far more dramatic. Jagwanti from Murghura recollects.
पहले शुरू में स्कूल आए तो कहन के क्रेडा स्कूल आवता विदेश के ले जाए, क्रेडा में लड़का पढ़ी तो पढ़ाई ले तो विदेश ले जाए, लड़का यहाँ न दे।
Ram Yash Singh, a former village headman, recollects.
अफवाहें कालीन के व्यवसायी, बड़े बड़े व्यवसायी जो थे जिनके यहाँ कालीन बुनाई का कार्य होता था, ये फैलाते थे और सामान्य तबका के बड़े बड़े जमींदार।
Understandably, the loom owners were opposed to children leaving the looms and joining schools. But why were the landlords hostile to education for the poor?
वो सब सोचते हैं कि नीच के बच्चा पढ़ ले ही तो ऊपर जाही, और जब ना ही पढ़त हैं हम हरवहिया करही, चरवहिया करही, गोरू चरही, बछरू चरही, कुछ भी करही, आई हमारा हर जोती ही तब उनके मजूरी देव, खियाओ पियाओ 4 दिना करही, 2 दिना का मजूरी देव, 2 दिना का न देव। यही से बड़े लोग, बड़े आदमी कहते हैं कि छोटे जाति के बच्चे नहीं पढ़ो।
Today, Kamlesh Tiwari, a landlord, concedes that the powerful have always been opposed to mass education.
जमींदार तो चाहते थे कि हमारा काम करे, बराबर करता रहे हमेशा। हमारा काम करता है इसका बाबा तो इसका लड़का हमारे लड़के का काम करे, हमारे नाती का काम इसका नाती करे, ऐसे ही पीढ़ी चली जाती थी। उनको चिंता थी कि अगर स्कूल खुल जाती है तो ये सब पढ़ने जाते हैं तो हमारा कौन काम करेगा।
Despite opposition, there were some villagers like Basant Lal who were in favor of these special schools for child weavers. He even offered a part of his own house to be used for running such a school.
हमको इन बच्चों के साथ जो अन्याय हो रहा था उससे हमें सख्त नफरत था, इसलिए हम यहाँ पर अपना जो है मकान दे दिए क्रेडा स्कूल चलाने के लिए।
One of the first special schools for children removed from looms came up in Basant Lal's house in Bikna village in 1989. Basant Lal and other supporters of the new schools had, meanwhile, to face hostilities from the powerful.
धमकी दिया कि अगर आप यहाँ पर स्कूल अगर चलाते रहेंगे तो एक दिन आपके ऊपर आपका जान भी खतरे में हो सकता है, नहीं आप यहाँ से अपना स्कूल हटा दीजिए।
Despite an atmosphere of fear and distrust, similar schools started functioning in other villages. In order to convince parents that their children would not be taken away and sold abroad, CREDA had made special arrangements for mothers to come and see their children in schools. They had also encouraged these mothers to motivate other women in their own villages. Gradually, parents started taking their children away from looms so that they could attend the new CREDA schools. Such parents were also taken to other villages in order to interact with adults there and dispel their fears.
Opening of a school was not enough, and we believe that without community mobilization and community participation, it's very difficult to tackle the problem of the child labor. And for this, we could mobilize the community at large. That includes the youth groups, the women's groups, the mothers group, elected heads of the village, and the people from the carpet industry.
Perhaps the new learners were themselves the biggest factor which helped change people's attitudes. Sitaram is a poor artisan in Bhagadu village and recollects the transformation in his life after his daughter Meena left the looms and joined a CREDA school.
जब पढ़ कर आती है लड़की तो माई को और बाबू को कहता है कि तुम लोग पढ़ो मेरे सामने, दस्तखत मत करो, लिखना सीखो। तो हम लोग जो है हमको थोड़ा थोड़ा पढ़ाने लगा तो मैं एकदम बढ़िया दस्तखत कर लेता हूँ। अब बच्चा कहता है कि साफ से रहो, खेती बाड़ी तनी ऐसा करो, मगर खेती बाड़ी करो, उपलब्ध करो। हम लोग यही काम होता है, टोकरी बांस का काम करते हैं हजूर, यही होता है। लड़की बहुत हम लोग को सिखा रहा है। अब वही हम लोग का माई बाप हो गया है बच्चों।
CREDA has set up 64 special schools so far. 3,192 children have been removed from the carpet industry because of these special schools. As many as 11,500 potential child laborers have also been enrolled in government primary schools as part of CREDA's school enrollment drive. In addition, 720 children have been admitted in pre-primary education centers. This is one of CREDA's special school in Dubar. The children here, all first-generation learners, are former carpet weavers. And all are being taught by specially trained teachers. Teachers who believe that learning can be fun.
ना बाबा ना तुम पकड़ लोगी तुम खा जाओगी.
Learning through games is encouraged and children get adequate opportunities of developing their skills. Away from the dingy sweatshops, these children now learn about triangles and fractions, about the lunar eclipse and the Atlantic Ocean.
अटलांटिक महासागर यहाँ है और एशिया महाद्वीप के पास प्रशांत महासागर.
The National Child Labour Project of the Government of India offers a small stipend to children who have stopped working and have joined school. This stipend is routed through CREDA, which has stipulated that every child have his or her own bank account. Once a month, every CREDA child goes to the bank to collect the stipend. The schools also provide free nutritious meals to the children at lunchtime. The nurturing environment of these schools is surely a dramatic change from the oppressive atmosphere of the looms. The students spend 3 years in these special schools. They can then join the government school in class 6. Students from CREDA schools thus get opportunities to carry on with their studies. Ram Shakal was in the first batch of CREDA students and today cycles 10 kilometers every day to this senior school at Povari. If it was not for CREDA, he would still be weaving carpets instead of sitting in this classroom studying botany. For the loom owners, CREDA schools meant a loss of cheap and docile labor. They often got aggressive with children who were on their way to school. Ramesh Kumar recollects how he was accosted.
शुरू में पढ़ने जाता था मैं तो हमारा बस्ता छीन लेता था, गलीचे वाला मालिक छीन लेता था, कहता था कि तुम पढ़ने मत जाओ और हमारा गलीचा बीनो, हाथ खींचता था पकड़ करके जी, कहता था कि तुम्हारे पिता को भी ले जाएंगे, थाना में बंद कर देंगे.
Apart from these threats, the loom owners could not really do much. That was largely because CREDA had won the support of those who were disadvantaged. Its marches drew big crowds.
सबको शिक्षा सबको प्यार, हर बच्चे का है अधिकार, बाल मजदूरी बंद करो, बच्चों को शिक्षा दो, बाल मजदूरी बंद करो.
Mobilization of village communities and creating mass awareness became an important component of CREDA's activities. Cycle rallies went from village to village, urging parents to fight child labor and send their children to school. More villagers joined the campaign, which spread to remote villages. The new school-going children also performed innovative street plays about the ills of child labor and the importance of education. In the final instance, if people responded positively, it was only because CREDA had demonstrated that good education was not a privilege for only a few. One significant reason for the villagers' wholehearted support for these new schools has been the choice of teachers. Teachers like Maikulal, who will never abuse the students and throw slates at them or make them wash his utensils. The reason is simple. Maikulal was himself a weaver as a child. CREDA has taken great care in selecting teachers who are sensitive. In the villages, a large number of meetings were conducted to discuss issues related to education and the rights of children. During such meetings, people themselves started suggesting ways of combating child labor. One strategy was to set up village-level vigilance committees which would go from house to house checking if there were children working on the looms.
We greatly rely upon NGOs like CREDA. I consider them as our eyes and ears. And it is these people who bring to our notice the employment of child labor and sometimes child bonded labor, and sometimes they bring to our notice the apathy of the administration in not taking action in spite of their going and telling them. And many actions and initiatives have been taken by the National Human Rights Commission on information furnished by NGOs like CREDA.
Under pressure, many loom owners had no choice but to shut down or reduce their operations. Meanwhile, CREDA set up training centers to teach women how to weave carpets so that they could fill up the vacuum in the labor market.
The carpet industry at present is providing employment to nearly 2 million people. We are not against carpet industry, but we are surely against the employment of the child labor in carpet industry.
However, even today, exploitation of the most brutal kind continues in these big carpet weaving sheds. In all likelihood, there would be around 40 children working within these walls. The children are normally brought here by agents who operate in villages in parts of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Sundari's son Naresh was only 10 years old when he was taken away by a village agent. He had then promised her that her son would become a master weaver and earn a lot of money. He had then given her an advance of 100 rupees, and that was the last time Sundari saw her son Naresh.
गाड़ी आई तो कहा कि ओने से आवत होते इसे जीवा करल त्योहार जुटी तब कि आज आ जाता ही सबके लेके आवलन घर में था हमरो जीवा करले कि हमरो लेके आवा आज आवत होता ही सबके गइल बड़न त त्योहार से सब आवत बड़न त हमरो जीवा करले कि हमरो लेके आज उतरत होता ही उ गाड़ी से आत होता ही उ गाड़ी से
Sundari stays in Bhagadu village in the Sonbhadra district of Uttar Pradesh. Recruiting children from villages like this was a common practice a few years ago.
अरे बहुत बच्चों गए हैं कि सर उसका कौन लिखा पढ़ा के गिना है कि कितना गया कौन बहुत भारी छत्र है बहुत भारी छत्र है तो यहाँ का लड़का बहुत दूर गए हैं उधर शहर में दलैचा मिलने के लिए
CREDA set up a few special schools in this area. As was the case in Mirzapur, parents here started changing their attitudes. They wanted their children to learn and not leave their villages to go to work in looms in some far-flung area. With some assistance from CREDA, many parents even took the initiative of bringing their sons back home. Tufani was one such child. He studies in this CREDA school but still remembers those days.
हम लोग काम दिया कि काम करना है 3 बजे से फिर 10 बजे रात तक हम लोग करते थे फिर खाना बनता था 10 बजे फिर खाए तो वो खाना बढ़िया नहीं मिलता था हम लोग के पेशाब करने जाते थे हम लोग ना तो कहता कि भाग जाए डंडा लेके जाओ पीछे पीछे नौकर को बैठाता हम लोग के पीछे
What CREDA did was to take children like Tufani to other villages and recount their experiences as child laborers. They also talked positively about their new schools. Today, villagers in this area do not allow agents to come and take their children away because they recognize the value of education.
तो हम लोग इतना कड़ाई किए हैं एकता बनकर जितने ही बच्चा पढ़ रहे हैं करेटा में वो सब लोग हम लोग एकता हो गए हैं कि इस गांव में हमारे गांव के अंदर कोई न ढूंढने पाए गलीचा बिनने के लिए तो कंपनी जो है डर के मारे यहाँ नहीं आते हैं
Students from CREDA schools quickly become role models. Villagers want their own children to be like them. Kunti Devi of Ganga Sair village describes the impact of CREDA schools.
जब CREDA संस्था में जाए लगन लड़का तो के कही कि उन्हें अपने देह का सफाई करे लगन तेल लगाए लगन साबुन लगावे लगन ओढ़ना कपड़ा सफा रखे लगन और खाए नहाए बढ़िया कायदे से बैठे भी जान लिहन और वो नहीं के देख कर दूसरा लड़का जाए लगन और भैया बहनी को अरे पीछे का लड़का माना जाए लगन वहाँ स्कूल में तो कुछ माना कि विद्या भी आए गए और वहाँ से छोड़न तो फिर दूसरे स्कूल में जाए लगन पढ़ाई और नहीं के देख के माना कि जे करे 2 ठे 4 ठे घरे बैठा रहे सब जाए लगन स्कूल.
The village Rani Bari offers a good example of how a CREDA school can have a ripple effect. Soon after this CREDA school started functioning, another school came up right next to it. This government primary school was set up on a piece of land donated by Azimullah, a Rani Bari villager.
CREDA school खुले के बाद हमारे सबके यहाँ स्कूल तो रही नहीं प्राइमरी स्कूल नहीं रहा लड़कियां पढ़ावे बदे जो CREDA से बाकी लड़कियां बचे ना ओके बदे हम लोग सरकार से प्रयास करत गए कि हमें प्राइमरी स्कूल चाहे तो कहें तोहरे यहाँ जमीन तो बा नहीं हमार तो हम अपन खुद जमीन दिया लड़कियां पढ़े बदे तो वो ना हमारे यहाँ स्कूल बनवाए.
CREDA has been receiving a large number of letters from villagers requesting that special schools be set up in their own areas. Clearly, a CREDA school does more than just offer education to child weavers. It gives a message to the larger community that education is important. Villagers then start taking active interest in their children's schooling as they have in Dobaha Devghatta. Here, in this school being constructed by CREDA, the villagers are contributing with some voluntary labor and a part of the construction material. More than that, the land on which it is coming up has been donated by 11 villagers. Srinath is one of them.
अब हम लोग तो पढ़े लिखे नहीं अगर हो सका था हमारे लोग के बाल बच्चे शिक्षित हो जाएं आगे बढ़ें तो हमारे सबका कष्ट दूर हो यही के लालच बस हम लोग अपन जमीन
स्कूल बनी दे दिया।
The new school will be about 500 meters from this CREDA special school for child weavers. It will provide education for those children who spend their days looking after cattle, working in the fields, doing domestic chores, and various off-the-loom activities. It was 10 years ago that CREDA set up the first special school. CREDA would then have to urge parents to take their children out of the looms and get them enrolled. Today, communities, acting through their village councils or gram panchayats, are taking initiatives in setting up new schools.
In this area, 65% children are out of school. Majority of them are the girl child. It indicates that all these children must be somewhere in the labor market. The committee has taken several initiatives against the child labor and the issue of the right of the child. Our next step is to strengthen the community initiatives so that they can work for the cause of elimination of the child labor and on the issue of child right.
In Mirzapur and Sonbhadra, the CREDA schools have demonstrated how wrong the established belief is. The belief that poor people will send their children to schools only when their incomes rise, and that child labor is inevitable in a poor country like India. Clearly, it is not.
8 से हम 1 उधार लेंगे तो 5 के पास जाएगा तो कितना हो जाएगा? 15।
कितना कठिनाई आए लड़का के जरूर पढ़ाना लिखाना जरूर करब हम। वो लड़के के हम पढ़ाएगी या उसके आगे जरूर कुछ अपने जीते करब। कितना कठिनाई आए वो बनी कई के मजूरी कई के झुआ फरसाट हो के सौदा बेच के कुछ भी कई के हम उसके आगे बढ़ावे की कोशिश करब।
3 चूहे थे,
चूहे छोटे छोटे थे।